Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the newest episode of the Theater Enthusiast podcast. I'm very excited to welcome our next group of guests. They are program heads for this really cool nonprofit organization called Maestra Music. If you guys don't know what Maestra Music is, which unfortunately I didn't until I found out I was lucky enough to interview these lovely people, I'm going to read you their mission statement because honestly, it's pretty fucking cool. And I also just want to apologize to anybody listening. I am terrible with reading out loud, so I apologize in advance. Maestro Music Inc. provides support, visibility, and community to the women and non-binary people who make the music in the musical theater industry. The membership is made up of composers, music directors, orchestrators, arrangers, copyists, rehearsal pianists, and other musicians who are underrepresented minority in musical theater. The organization initiatives include monthly educational seminars, mentorship programs, technical skills workshops, networking events, and online resources, and partnerships that aim to promote equality of opportunity and to address the many historical disadvantages and practices that have limited women and non-binary composers and musicians in the musical theater. I'm so proud of myself. I read that so well. Thank you. I'm just gonna on my back. I'm also very excited to announce that on Monday, March 25th at 8 p.m. at Sony Hall, Maestra Music is also going to have their fourth annual Amplify concert that celebrates the rich creativity and ingenuity of the maestras. So you can also get tickets for that at maestramusic.com/amplify. And please join me in welcoming Kat Sherrell. Woo! And
Hello.
hold on, I have it written down. Kathleen Wrinn. Woo! Did I say everything correctly?
Yes,
Yay.
you did.
Yes, you did great.
Nice to
So,
be here.
yeah, so I mentioned that you guys are program heads of Maestra. So I would like you guys to say what you're in charge of and maybe give a little bit of insight into your job with Maestra with that job title. Whomever would like to go first.
Sure, I'll jump in. I'm Kat Sherrell. I am, along with my co-chair, Amanda Wanza Morgan. We co-chair the Regional and Affinity Groups program, which is basically, so the regional groups are basically Maestra anywhere outside of New York City and sort of including New York as a Northeast chapter. I suppose you could look at it that way. So basically communities of Maestras, wherever they may gather, wherever they may be trying to find each other in their professional community. And then the affinity groups are maestras who share a vocation or an identity. So it's like professional groups like Maestra MDs. So music directors who want to get together and complain about how the rehearsal process is going or whatever, or share joy in how the rehearsal process is going. Maestra moms, Maestra composers and lyricists, Maestra pride, and student maestras. So there's a couple more that are, sort of being discussed. But basically, so maestras who may have something else in common other than being a maestra can find each other and talk about, those sort of granular things that come up for them as they're navigating their life.
And hello, I'm Kathleen, and I'm the directory manager for Maestra. And so I am the first point of contact for members when they apply for Maestra for the directory, or if they have questions about creating or updating their profiles. As directory manager, I am also responsible for helping to craft the vision for the future of directory improvements and redesigns and major initiatives, of which we have a couple in the works right now. And so all of the exciting members that Kat just talked about, I often get to interface with them and answer their questions and help them to become a part of the Maestra community.
So if somebody wants to become a member of Maestra, how would one go about doing that? And is there certain qualifications that they need to become a member?
Absolutely. So we have, if you go to the Maestra website, which is maestramusic.org, you can register to become a member of the directory. The only requirements we have is that you include your photo, you include a bio, which talks a bit about your work in the musical theater industry. You select a region that you are a part of, where you are hireable for employment, and that you select from a list of Maestra expertise, which I will pull up the options to tell you what some of them are. Um, But we have things like theatrical composer, theatrical lyricist, arranger, orchestrator, copyist, a voice teacher with a roster of students, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of different expertise on the list. But as long as you identify as one of those in your life, whether it's professionally or you are building that skill set, maybe you're a student maestra and you're interested in music directing, but you've just begun, then you are welcome in the Maestra directory. And of course, just to say the obvious, but also that you are either a woman or a non-binary person.
Yeah. So, Kat, I wanted to ask you because you are regional and can I say where you're located? I don't want to
Sure.
okay, you're located in New Mexico. Okay, I didn't want to be like, where is
It's a big
she?
state.
Yeah.
People would have to look really hard for me.
Yeah. So I want your
It takes a long
specific
time.
location, address, social security number. No, I'm just joking. So we discussed before we started recording that you're based in New Mexico. And what I really like is what's also important that you want to kind of expand Maestra because it's not just New York. Do you want to touch a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. I think the first thing I'll say, excuse me, it is 2 hours earlier here, so my voice is still waking up. So the first thing I'll say is there have always been maestras all over the world. Like there have always been women and non-binary people in the music departments creating music for theater everywhere. So part of what Maestra is doing for the regional groups is just finding people who want to connect with their community on a deeper level. So for me, I lived in New York for 10 years. I still have a sort of back and forth relationship with New York that we're always navigating. Then I lived in Seattle for 3 and worked in regional theater at the Fifth Avenue. And then I've spent about 6 years of my life on the road. And during that time, as we know, there was a global pandemic, and I landed in my hometown in rural New Mexico, about a 3-hour drive from everything. So I feel like I have a pretty comprehensive relationship with different size communities around the country. And I got to work in Manila last fall in the Philippines, so I got to experience some international work as well. So it's really important to me. I'm really passionate about maestros being able to find their community in New York, of course, but also wherever they may be based and whether they work mostly in academia. I think the thing we find with the regional groups is that people's work profile looks different in different places. So like if you live in New York, you might, if you're like, at or aiming for the top of your profession, you might work on Broadway. You might have some film and TV in there. If you are like a theater, dramatic, storytelling type of musician, that's maybe what your work profile looks like. Or maybe not. There could be anything, but that's kind of a profile of a New York musician. If you work in LA, you probably are aiming to play for like film score recordings. You might do theater, you might teach, you might be a writer. We have a ton of writers in Maestra in LA. Because even though it's not like famous for being a big theater town, there is a lot of storytelling that happens, obviously, as we know, in Hollywood and the surrounding areas. If you work in Seattle, you might do regional theater, you might also teach. So there's just like different things that you do, and your life works a little differently. So when I moved to Seattle from freelancing in New York for 10 years, I was like kind of on the hiring side because I had a job at the theater, but the musicians, I was like, oh, wow, they plan out their whole season kind of at once, like spring, summer, the hiring happens sort of on a rolling basis, but basically by like fall, you kind of know how many jobs you're going to have over the course of that academic year. If you're going to play for the tour that's coming in, if you're playing for the 5-week run of the holiday show. So it's just kind of different from the way you may plan your life out if you work in New York or if you teach at a university in Texas or whatever. So it's really, that's kind of what we do. As far as what we do in the program, right now, it's really about getting maestros together in person. So it's working more on a local level. This program sprang up during the pandemic when everybody was on Zoom. And so it was sort of more regionally based. And then as we've come out of the pandemic, we've learned / rediscovered that, oh, we do live performance, which means location matters and being in person matters. So we're kind of working to build the community more like getting together for coffee networking or meeting up before a show and then getting to go together, sharing some songs together. So there's still virtual programming and chances to get together for the regional groups on Zoom, but since that's less attractive for everybody right now, we have local moderators now who are trying to get parties together, just little gatherings together to get to know, network, share stories, talk about their community. So that's the regional group. And then the affinity groups, you can be anywhere in the world and be one in the affinity group. So that is more sort of about the Facebook group. That's the infrastructures. There's a Facebook group for each regional or affinity group that you can join after you join the directory. You have to be a member of Maestra to join these private Facebook groups, but you can communicate on there, as well as there sometimes being the occasional virtual chance to get together. We had a wonderful songwriting sort of accountability group in January. We each wrote a song a day for 5 days and then shared them on the Saturday of that week. So that was with the composer lyricist group. So there's a lot going on. Yeah. What else do you want to know?
Everything. So let's
That was like my
backtrack
quick brain dump.
Yeah, no, it's great. So let's backtrack a little bit because I always start my podcast with whomever is on saying, like, where are you from? Which we didn't start with. So I would love to kind of get to know each one. God, this sounds like so hippy dippy, and I apologize for anybody who does not feel that way. But your journey, where did your love for music, composing, musical theater, what have you, conducting, all of those things, where did that start from? And what led you to end up getting involved with Maestra?
Absolutely. I'll jump in on that. So I began as a musical theater performer. And then I moved into being a lyricist and a book writer. I did my graduate studies at NYU at the Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program. And I am now an assistant professor of musical theater at Syracuse University. I teach in the BFA Musical Theater program. And because of my background as a performer, as a writer, and now as an educator, I'm really passionate about supporting the development of new musical work, specifically works by marginalized identities. I'm the founder and artistic director of an initiative called New Works, New Voices at Syracuse, which was created to support the development of musical works by writers and composers whose perspectives have been historically underrepresented in the musical theater canon. So that's really kind of my niche and my big passion. And I initially got involved with Maestra because when I was first working at Syracuse, I was hoping to program more musicals by women and gender expansive writers as part of our production season. And having to Kat's point about, when you live in different environments, different type of work environments, you have access to different resources. And so I had lived in Chicago for 3 years. I had lived in New York City for 4 years. But then kind of leaving those more major markets and coming up to Syracuse, I realized that I did not have easy access anymore to information about what new work was being created. And so it was kind of hard to figure out where to find, like, who is making what, because it wasn't happening in my backyard anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I started reaching out to see, is there a database? Is there somewhere that we can find that has these new musicals listed or has composers and lyricists listed? Like, where can we find people? And that was back in 2019, and Maestra had just come into being. And I was recommended to reach out to Georgia Stitt, the founder of Maestra, to connect with her and talk to her a bit. And so I did. I reached out and I explained a little bit about who I was and where I was coming from, and that said that I just really wanted to get involved and support in any way that I could and help promote the mission and promote the visibility of all of these creators and musicians in the organization. And so I became the directory manager after that, and I've been involved ever since.
Great. Kat?
So let's see, what was the question? Where do we start? Where am I from? What was my musical journey and how did I get involved with Maestra? Okay, so I'm from the middle of nowhere. Like I said, I'll tell you where I am because, like, if people want to come find me, they're going to have to put some effort into it. So, like, bravo. I'm in Silver City, New Mexico, which if you take your hand and you draw a point between Albuquerque, Phoenix, and El Paso, if you know where those 3 cities are, I'm in the middle of that, which is a very rural, isolated community of about 10,000. It's a mining town. The population of the whole county is 30,000. So anyway, so far away, I didn't know what Broadway was really until I grew a vague awareness of what Broadway and musical theater were, like the names for them, when I went to college, and my roommate freshman year was a musical theater major at University of Northern Colorado. But, like, I grew up on The Sound of Music and Fiddler on the Roof. So, like, I knew that you could tell stories and have music with that, like, but I didn't have any sort of personal, visceral connection to the idea that those were jobs that you could do. I just knew I loved playing the piano. My grandmother and mom were both sort of semi-professional pianists, organists. They played for church. They accompanied solo and ensemble, that kind of thing. So I, had music in my life from my family and loved playing the piano, went and majored in piano, knowing full well, I was like, I don't want to be a concert pianist. That sounds not like what I want to do. And all I knew was that I wanted to move to New York after I got out of school. And the only reason I knew that was when I went to school in Greeley, I thought it was a big city because they had a shopping mall. And I very quickly realized it is not a big city. And then I happened to go to Mannes. Mannes School of Music had a keyboard workshop. And I went there after my sophomore year. And I was like, oh, looking up the skyscrapers, this is a big city. I'm coming here when I'm done with school. So I did, having no idea what I wanted to do. But sort of stumbled through the virtues of Craigslist and classmates who'd majored in musical theater, dating myself a little bit with the Craigslist, sort of stumbled into it. And then ultimately how I ended up working, getting into working on Broadway was I speak Spanish. It's a little rusty right now, so don't ask me to speak Spanish right now.
I don't speak Spanish at
But
all. I know how to say like
great.
ito and
Muy
ventito,
bien.
which is 25.
At the time, I was quite fluent, and I ended up working on the musical In the Heights when it was on Broadway, and I got to do vocal rehearsals because they needed somebody who had Spanish skills. And I'm telling you, my piano skills were like not up to snuff at the time for the level of score that show is, but because of my Spanish, it gave me a chance to like work really hard and get better in the other areas. So then, things happened moving around the world. And then 2020, I heard of Maestra when I lived in Seattle, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this amazing thing is happening after I've moved away from New York. And I was so sad that I couldn't be there for Maestra meetings. And then enter COVID. And suddenly I had been able to attend one Maestra meeting before COVID. And I was like, I'm in New York for this one. I'm going to be there. And, got to meet Georgia in person and chat with her for a hot second and meet some other amazing women. I was like, wow, there's just so many more of us than I ever knew. Like, I'm not actually alone in the world. And then
Like how
COVID
Kathleen's
happened.
like, I know I'm the directory
She's
manager.
like, I process.
Like, I
You
know
definitely got
everyone.
I just
there's
want
more than
everyone
2,000 of you. Yeah.
in the world of
Wow.
AI. I just want everyone out there to know that Kathleen personally goes through every profile application. She's not a robot, as far as I know.
I'm not. Yeah.
I've never met you in
CAPTCHA
person, so
says
you
I'm
might
not a
be.
robot.
So yeah, so everything kind of went on as, like Maestro went online. I wasn't involved at the level I am now at the time. So I don't really know what the beginning conversations of that, but they started doing these amazing technical workshops once a week where you could go on Zoom and like learn about finale notation, learn about being a music assistant or a sub in a pit, or like just so many different kinds of skills for writing and playing and music directing musical theater. Which was just an amazing resource to have and an amazing thing. It was like, I think it was Thursday afternoons, or maybe I think they were twice a week for a while, like
I
during
think
the
it was
height
twice a
of the
week.
pandemic.
Yeah.
So they worked really, really hard to continue providing support and community. Bam, mission statement. They worked so hard to be like, figure out a way to still connect. And what was amazing for me, I landed in New Mexico during the pandemic for reasons that are too long and boring to go into right now. But I was here all by myself in New Mexico as we were all isolated in our little Zoom boxes around the country and the world. And it was just so amazing. And I wrote to Georgia and I was like, I would love to get involved. It seems like you guys are doing a lot. And like, if I could help from my little bedroom in New Mexico, let me know. And a little while later, she sent me back a long email with like, well, here are the things we could do. And this is like a long page. She's like, basically check the ones you're interested in. And I was like, boom, 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 boom. And I checked like 4 different things and found myself on 4 committees. And since then things have evolved, like and regional and affinity groups wasn't even a thing yet. Like the Facebook groups existed for like Southern California and a couple of other places that have pretty large entertainment and music communities. I think like Midwest, because of Chicago, existed at the time. But yeah, that evolved in, I serve on the DEIA committee, and I think I was on the education committee for a while. There's an amazing mentorship program that we should definitely talk more about. So that's how I got involved with Maestro. Was I sent Georgia an email at a time when they were growing a lot, and it happened to be a time when I could contribute something, and they needed something, and yeah, and here we are.
Awesome. So because you did, I'm so curious about, I sometimes also, when I'm talking with people, I make notes because I'm like, I want to go back to that. I wrote down in the Heights to Hamilton because you were on the road for a very long time with Hamilton. So
Yes.
is there connection because you did in
Yeah.
the Heights too?
Yeah, for
And
sure. Because I knew the
yeah.
people. So at the time, the Hamilton tour I went on happened to start in Seattle. Like I moved to Seattle. It was a chance to stick conduct, which is why I moved to Seattle, because it was a really cool job. I loved getting to, I was like, move across the country for a full-time theater job. Okay. That's enough of a reason to leave New York. So I wasn't actually like super in touch with the team at the time, but I heard through the grapevine that Hamilton was coming to Seattle, and I was like, oh, that's a new tour. I'm going to reach out to the people I know who are involved and be like, hey, if you just need someone in Seattle, I'd be happy to just be here for you. But also like, I would go on tour. So they reached out, and I did have to, I had to play a little bit and, show that, yes, I can handle this music. I can rap and play the piano at the same time, which I will tell you is really funny, because I'm not the most convincing rapper, but I
I
am.
want to hear it, but I'm not going to ask you to do it.
Okay, I will say my George Washington is lit.
I
But
don't want to
is
put
all.
you on the spot, but like one day I
We
would
are
love to hear it.
outgunned. Okay, that's enough. That's all you get. You're gonna have to wait until I turn 70 and I tour my one-woman show of Hamilton at the piano.
Oh yeah, is that
That's
what your
like,
one woman show is going to be?
that's my dream. That's
It's
my
going to
dream.
be Cat sings Hamilton at the piano.
Yes. Yeah, it's gonna be like the 77th national tour.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, yes, I became involved with Hamilton because I knew the people from doing In the Heights, and they were familiar with me and my skill set and me as a person, and knowing that I probably won't make everyone hate me touring on the road, because that's a different thing. You're like living with your coworkers in a little bubble, touring around the country to all of these unfamiliar locations. So yeah, that's how I ended up. And is almost exactly 6 years ago. So I was on the road for almost exactly 6 years, minus a pandemic, however you may calculate that.
Oh wow. That's a long time to be on the road, but
Part
you,
of that was LA. So I was in
oh,
LA for
okay.
the better part of a year. So that was technically a tour, but felt more like getting to live in LA for a while, which
Yeah.
was cool.
Nice. So Kathleen, let's talk about you a little bit too. So you mentioned that you're also like a writer and composer. Do you want to talk about some of the stuff, your own personal work?
Yeah, sure. I'm actually primarily a lyricist and a book
Okay.
writer, so I'm the words person side of
Okay.
of musical theater. One of my works is called The Bridge, which is about it's the story of the woman who secretly built the Brooklyn Bridge. I presented some work last year at the Yale Innovation Summit in May, so we got to show some songs and scenes from that, which was very exciting. I'm also in residence with an organization called Midnight Oil Collective, which is an arts venture studio. And so it's been developing the project that way. But I recently, too, a lot of my work has been in also developing musical works by other creators, too. So I've directed a number of works at Syracuse, both at the workshop level. Doing readings of new musicals. I'm right now also directing our main stage production of Head Over Heels that we've got kind of a different spin on. So yeah, so I wear a lot of different hats in
Yeah.
the organization, and especially as an educator, and a lot of mentorship too of my students' new works, whether it be creating one-person cabarets or writing their own original musicals or doing songwriting mentorship. Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys being a part of Maestra and being program heads, but for your own like personal like inner like nobody can see what I'm visually doing, but I think you guys understand me being like, like your personal like in your soul, in your heart, what has Maestra done for you guys professionally, like, personally, aside from being program heads? How has the program worked for you?
I'll jump in. I guess the first thing that pops into my head is there is an amazing songwriter and I think she writes her own lyrics. Oh, I just had a blank. Songwriter and lyricist Adrienne Russ, who is LA based. She's had a long career of lots of different things. She had an off-Broadway show in the 1990s, and and she works for Society of Composer and Lyricists, does their interviews with different people. Amazing person. She was looking for an orchestrator and person to produce tracks for a small cast musical she was doing, the type that goes to small theaters and uses produced music, like track music. So she was looking for someone to do that. And Georgia actually had her reach out for like recommendations in the LA area. And I gave her like 3 or 4. And then I was also like, I'm going to throw my name in the hat because the show you're describing, which is, it was a musical about women's suffrage. And kind of my sweet spot is like early 20th century, like the first half of the 20th century music, like the early jazz, ragtime, that, vaudeville era. I love writing music in that style and orchestrating music in that style. So she, went through the choices, and I gave her good choices. Like I was like, I'm not going to give her like nonsense, and then pick me. But she did pick me, and I had a wonderful collaboration with her on that musical and got to, orchestrate her wonderful songs and produce them in Logic and, build. It's like, it was kind of fun to like get to dig into that skill set for myself. So professional networking, as well as just, and getting to mentor being on both sides of the mentor. Georgia was my mentor in last year's cohort, which was amazing, of getting to like share work with her and getting to just sort of be the like, I like to do everything, you do everything. Can we talk about this? Because this life is crazy. So just having a brain to pick on that has been amazing. And then being on the other side, this is my 4th year in the mentorship program, which runs November through May. So applications, like look for them if you're listening, thinking, oh, I want to apply, or I know someone who should apply. That's like around September. Start looking for notifications about that. But like my mentee from last year is she's the associate conductor on the Come From Away tour. And it's really fulfilling to get to sort of, dig into the nitty-gritty. Like this is a weird profession. There's no one path. And it can feel really lonely. I think it can feel lonely for anybody, but especially if you don't see yourself represented a whole lot. It can feel really lonely. It can be like, I think I made a bad life choice choosing this profession, unless you have someone to talk to and be like, yeah, no, that's normal. Or no, that's not normal. You should talk to your company management about that, or, whatever. So that's my personal take on Maestra.
I was going to say too, from the educator side of it, I think something that has been just so heartening is when I do have, like I'm thinking right now of one particular young woman in our program at Syracuse who has an interest in composing and an interest in music directing, but she's still at the early stages of all of this. And she came to talk to me about, I have some skills, but I also have a lot of passion for this, but also just a lot of fear around how do I even begin to go down this path. And the fact that I was like, all right, well, here's where you start. You go to this website, you can go to maestramusic.org, you're going to join the Student Maestras group, you're going to go watch 1 million technical workshops, and you can apply for the mentorship program, and and just this whole wealth and world of resources to be able to show her, and also to have her be able to so quickly see herself in these other women who are and non-binary individuals who are all at different sort of levels along their own path. Like Kat said, there's no one pathway through this, right? But I think, there's the adage of you have to see it to be it, right? You have to be able to kind of imagine yourself in these positions. And I get so excited by seeing my students, particularly young female students, who are getting to see women in these leadership positions in the music industry and in the musical theater industry at a rate and at a quantity that I feel like even when I was their age, I didn't get to, right? And I didn't have access to it. And while Maestra absolutely has been instrumental for making connections for me as well professionally, and I love my own involvement in it, I honestly think the thing that gives me the most hope just about the future of our industry is that these young people can just so easily now slot into this community that wants to lift them up and see them succeed.
Yeah. So you keep mentioning, this industry, and, that's kind of the focus of Maestra, female non-binary with this industry. How can other people help in creating change within the industry? Because I feel like coming from like an outside perspective, you hear me? Perspective. I've noticed some change, but I'm also like not in the community in that way. But I mean, there's also a very long way to go for a lot of change to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I can I jump in on that for a
Yeah,
second?
of
I just because
course.
I think, it doesn't take a lot. Like it takes a lot of little moves and little changes across the board to make kind of a movement of change, whether nationally or globally. And I think that we sometimes think that we have to do some enormous sweeping thing as individuals in order for any needle to move. And I think it's actually like, look at where you have power and influence and perhaps privilege, or access to resources, and think about who you're sharing those with. Just put quite simply, take a chance on somebody new, right? Like I think we all at times we need to hire our friends, or we want to hire people who we know that we work well with. But we also, now that like Maestra exists as a directory, Muse exists as a directory, which is sort of a sister organization to Maestra, but for musicians of color in the musical theater industry. There's the RISE directory, RISE, which stands for Representation, Inclusion, and Support for Employment. Which was a big initiative by the Miranda Foundation and Maestra last year that was pushed forward, and it's seeking to build a more inclusive theater industry for people behind the scenes in theater making. So these resources exist now. There's really no excuse to not take a chance and use them. And even if it just means that you bring one new person into your team, you give one person their first job and something, I think that little bit of risk can go a really long way. And to give people the opportunity, you were even saying earlier, Kat, about like you got the opportunity in the Heights to be able to like rise to that challenge, and did so beautifully. And honestly, I feel the same way about teaching at Syracuse. I feel like when I first got hired here, there were a lot of ways in which I had to learn on the job and prove that I could do it. But it's just, but we both did, right? And I
Yeah.
think that I just, I don't know. I would love to see more of that, more of like, this person has potential, this person has passion, and this person hasn't maybe necessarily been given a chance yet. I'm going to give them their chance.
Yeah, I will say it was something that has stuck in my head, like to your point of like no one comes into this industry fully formed. We all grow throughout our hopefully grow
Right.
throughout our careers. There's something, the one thing, it was a passing comment in the middle of a big paragraph of whatever he said, but that Alex Lacamoire once said, and I don't even think he said it to me, but he was talking about Hamilton and he said something about I had to up my game. And I was like, whoa, Alex Lacamoire had to up his game. Like, because in my mind, he's like a musical god and always has been. So, like, I think, and the thing you said about there's no longer an excuse for I think the excuse you would hear 10 years ago about,
I
oh,
can't
why aren't
find
you hiring?
them.
Exactly. Like, why aren't you like, why aren't you hiring more musicians of color? Why aren't you hiring more female music directors? Why, blah, blah, blah. Why aren't you hiring whatever identity is underrepresented in the musical theater industry? The excuse was always like, oh, I don't know any of them. I can't find them. And I'm like, well, social media exists, social networking exists. And this is sort of the answer to that, like infrastructurally, is the directories where you can find all these people. And sure, you want, if you're a producer or if you're hiring a band, a contractor, whatever you're doing, of course you want people who are not going to make your life hell during the run of the show. But there is that, like, you have to have a first job somewhere, you have to have a second job somewhere. So that just those first few opportunities to build that experience, yeah, and then people know you. So I think there is like the work Kathleen does and just the directory and the RISE and the Muse directories that are out there are just so important to both making it just more visible and more familiar, and taking away, like putting some accountability on the hiring side of, you have these resources now and we're improving them, we're working on them to make them as accurate and representative and useful as possible. So like, please go use those resources in your hiring.
Absolutely. And I just one other thing to the you're saying about upping his game, which I love hearing that too, right? It's like kind of impossible to conceive of that. But I think something that, thinking back to your question before, Allison, about like what Maestra has given me, I think and so much of this happened as well during the pandemic, in some of the meetups that occurred virtually or in the different technical workshops. I think what I have been struck by is the openness of this community and the willingness for people to talk about I don't know, the things they don't know yet, the skills that they don't have. There's like, I feel like a lot of times as a woman in spaces, I've had to pretend that I kind of know everything or have all the answers, because if I admit that I don't, then suddenly there's going to be a questioning of my authority. There's going to be some sense that like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be in this position if I don't know that already. And I have found that there is such an empowering feeling of being able to just be in a group of other women and say, I don't know how to do this yet, but I really want to. Is there anybody here who can help teach me how to do that, or who could point me in the right direction? And just to be constantly lifting each other up and watching like that lift as you climb, like everybody is kind of moving themselves forward and everyone else forward, and there's no ego in it. And I just, that has been so thrilling to me. And I think that Georgia and I have talked about this, where like Maestra was created, when she created it in the beginning, it was for exactly this reason, Kat, of people said, oh, I don't know where to find anybody, right? And she had her own spreadsheet of like all of these female musicians, and she was like, I'm gonna take it and put it somewhere where other people can access it. And so Maestra was created sort of for the directory, but then what came out of that was really this community, and the way I think that she could never have envisioned in the beginning, of the ways in which the people in that directory, when you could just get them in spaces together, would be able to have that chemistry form that would move us all forward, as a, I don't know, like as a community, as individuals, and as an industry too.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on as an industry there and say, like, I think the more different voices we have in storytelling in our little corner of the narrative making ecosystem, the stronger we are as a society. Like, it's not like a club of women and non-binary people who are like by themselves, like we're not walling ourselves
No.
in to be like, like a little, we're meant to be out in the community, out at like fully represented in the storytelling sphere, I think is the aim. And it's not meant to be like a zero-sum game with men. Like some of the pushback Maestra has gotten, and I'm not super familiar with it because it's not my job. But I sometimes am apprised of it, so there's been a little bit of pushback because it's hard to find a job sometimes. The pandemic was obviously really hard. Orchestra sizes, as far as musicians go, orchestra sizes have been shrinking for decades. Technological changes have made our careers harder unless you're a keyboard player, and then you become the string and woodwind and brass section. So there's that. But with AI and everything, there's just a lot of sort of threats to our livelihood. And so then I think if you're looking from the perspective of a man who wants to be a pit musician or whatever, it can seem, Maestra can seem like another threat, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to lift up women, non-binary people, and the entire community, and advocate for what we feel is the value we're adding to the world. So I think it is tough when there is a finite number of Broadway theaters, there is a finite and sometimes shrinking number of Broadway chairs. So those types of jobs are different, but I think there are a lot of ways to be a musician in the world. And so we're here for everyone being better and everyone having what they need to live and have a good life, and stories being better and more representative of who's actually out there in the world.
Yeah. Excuse me, I didn't mean to cough. To kind of jump on that, Kat, you mentioned the mentorship program and you're like, we need to talk about it. So I think it's time that we talk about the mentorship program with Maestra. And Kathleen, have you been I mean, you teach, so you're like your own type of mentor. Are you also involved with the mentorship program with Maestra?
I haven't yet been. It's something that
Okay.
I'm interested in, but my mentorship mostly occurs through my job here at Syracuse. But yeah, I'd love to hear Kat talk more
So
about it.
Kat, it's all about you right now.
Okay,
Talk to us.
so
Mentorship program. What is it? How does one get involved with it? Your involvement. Let's hear all of the juicy details.
So it's run by educators, educator Maestras, Meg Zervulis, who's an amazing musical director in the New York area, as well as an educator, and Sonia Hayden. And I don't know her personally, but anyway, look her up. She's amazing too. She's a composer. And they built this program that runs 6 months out of the year. So basically from November through May, you meet with your mentor or mentee, and about once a month, like it's prescribed once a month for an hour you're supposed to meet. So that's the bare minimum. I find that, I'm texting sometimes with my mentee this year, or, like the other day, she was like, I was trying to write in a cafe and someone's dog came and pooped underneath the next table. So like, it's not just the hour, like you form a relationship and, can have some back and forth. And during that time, you talk about whatever, you set goals at the beginning or objectives or intentions for what you want to get out of your mentorship, and what you as a mentor feel you're most able to provide. This is all of this information is gathered during the fall, I don't know the exact dates, but I know it's around September, October, and then November is like the first month of the mentorship, the pairing has happened. So Meg and Sonia and their committee of amazing people read through all the applications. They read through, familiarize themselves with the mentors who have volunteered to mentor, be part of the program, and they pair people up. And I have to say, they do an amazing job of pairing people up according to, preferences expressed by the mentee, of like who they would most, like if they're like, I would really prefer to study with, or to like have a mentor who is also LGBTQ and a member of the gay community, or, whatever their identity may be, that they might want to talk about really specific things. Or, I'd really like to study with a musician of color. I'd really like to work with someone who knows how to make a career outside of New York, or whatever those preferences may be, they can express them in their application. And then the team, I just like, I'm amazed at how, like, at least like the pairings I've had, and maybe anyone they paired me with would be amazing, but I'm just like, wow, they really nailed it. We have so much in common and yet some contrasting things that make, and, like their goals. I know how to, I know what I can offer, and, it's also like not a hierarchical thing. Like, so it's more of a, like, what can we learn from each other? Because I think it's like less prescriptive than like, oh, you must practice your scales and it's not that kind of a mentorship. I feel like it's a little bit more, eye level. For instance, my mentee this year, she's almost the same age. She's like maybe 5 years younger than me. She's a mom. I'm not a mom. So like with the caregiving thing, like I'm helping my parents who are getting older right now. So sometimes we bond over just responsibility to family members. But it feels like we have just different experiences. And then I have experiences in some areas that she wants to expand. And but like it doesn't feel like I'm a professor and this is my protege all the time. Like it really feels like sharing and supporting each other, as well as occasionally offering a perspective, or like holding up a mirror and being like, hey, I'm seeing you're resisting putting yourself out there as a voice teacher because you're grossed out by a different voice teacher's advertising, or whatever the case may be. Just to use an example from a previous mentee. What else do you want to know about the mentorship program? It's awesome. If you are interested and haven't been a part of it before on either side, you should definitely keep an eye out for it in the fall.
Well, so you said that people volunteer to be mentors. Do you want to, is it just,
I should clarify, there's
Yeah.
actually a small stipend that it's paid into it's like $200. So it is, I think one thing about Maestra actually that is related to this is I think they really try not to take advantage of people's labor, because that is a whole thing about being a woman, I think, in the world, is oftentimes the labor that is typically performed by women is often the invisible, unpaid kind, or underappreciated. And I think that Maestra does their best to, offer something in return to people who are giving of their time, or putting their time into Maestra's projects. That is the intention anyway. There's one other thing in the mentorship program. There's a lot of opportunities for like group gatherings. So there's like, again, there's a Facebook group for mentors and mentees to connect with each other if they want to discuss something. But there's also there's like programs. Trying to remember, I've been on a bunch of different virtual things recently, but there was one that I was like, this is a mentorship community thing. I can't remember which one it was. But just, again, it's kind of like the technical workshops, but a chance to get together for an hour or two and learn about something, or network. So there are some opportunities to gather like as a community, not just one-on-one, during the course of the program.
Yeah. So kind of just to step aside from Maestra for a moment, just for your own personal stuff in your careers and whatnot, in regards to, I guess, quote unquote, mentoring people, what are some of the biggest lessons that you would like your mentees or your students to take away from you as the teacher or the mentor with all of your experience within the field and the industry? I know
I'd
that's
say,
like a boom.
woo, yeah, that's a
Kathleen's
good one.
like,
A big question.
whoa. Well, that's
Right,
like I
right.
said when we started, like the main goal of the podcast is to whoever is listening to kind of get an idea of like, how to make it within the industry, and everybody's paths and journeys are so different. And yeah,
The
sorry.
thing I'm sitting with a lot right now, being in rural New Mexico, where there is not a Broadway scene, the thing I'm sitting with a lot is there's no right or wrong way to interface with the industry as a profession. You can have it, I'm saying this as an affirmation as well as a statement of what I believe to be true. Um, you can have it in your life in the size and scope that works for you. If that means you have a different career on the side because you don't work full-time in the industry, if that means you go back and forth, if that means you're one of the people who spends years on the road and then comes home for 3 months at a time between contracts, or if that means you're full-time in New York, only working in New York, like it's all valid. And I think, for me personally, that's really important because I'm not doing the most sort of like publicly validated way. Like I was touring with Hamilton, like that's pretty shiny and it was awesome. I loved it. There's nothing more thrilling than conducting that show. And right now I'm in a small, not very glamorous town in the middle of nowhere, connecting with like my own creative projects and things that are important to me as a person. And so like anywhere I'm holding up my fingers, like there's a spectrum. So wherever you are along that spectrum is okay, and you're the only person who can figure out what is right for you in terms of being part of something that doesn't always care about you personally as a person.
I so appreciate you saying that, Kat. And I think it's just thinking about moving through your life, and I think about my own life and like where musical theater has fit into my life, and when I've been more immersed in it, when I've been farther away from it, and kind of how I've gone to and away from, and then dead in the center of it. And yeah, and that relationship shifts. I think that just knowing that too, that like there are to listen to yourself, right? To listen to yourself about if you're feeling like there's some part of you. Like I remember for me when I was living in New York, even though I was in the center in many ways of the industry, based on the work that I was doing for my survival job and how much time that was taking, I remember having a conversation with my roommate and I said, I have never felt farther away from my art form than at this time. And that was when I was in the epicenter of it, right? And so for me, part of why I left New York was because I wanted to work more in musical theater. And I was like, I want to be making my living through this thing that I love. And so for me today, like as a professor of musical theater, like I'm doing that. I'm doing it in a different way than what I anticipated in the beginning. But that was a need for me where I was like, it's more important to me to have my living be made in this art form than it is for me to say that I live in New York. And that was a big moment for me. I think what I would say as the big advice, maybe two things. One is more about creative process and one is more about career trajectory. In terms of career trajectory, I would say don't be afraid to try new things. Even as you get a little bit older, don't be afraid to admit things you don't know or to do something for the first time. I've started directing quite a bit more now at Syracuse. This is a new thing for me. This my first full production is going to be opening this Friday of Head Over Heels. It's my first time doing that, and like in stepping into that space with my students, right, and be doing something for the first time while my students are also learning and doing things for the first time I've learned to let that be something that's empowering for me rather than intimidating for me, and to say to them, I'm learning too, and we're going to do that together. So I think that's something I would suggest, because otherwise doors start closing, right? I think you feel like as you get a little bit older, it's like, oh, I haven't done that yet. I can't do it now. And I think don't stop yourself, right? Like don't fire yourself. Don't be the person who puts the brakes on yourself. So that's one thing. And the other thing, more creative process in thinking about my work as a writer and also my mentorship of my students who are making their own projects, is learning how to strike a balance between listening to others and taking feedback and being open to that and being open to learning, while still being able to listen to yourself and your own voice. I think a lot of mentorship is striking that balance, and how to trust yourself without being pigheaded, right? While still being willing to take suggestions and to be open to realizing that there are things that you might be wrong about, but without ignoring kind of your inner voice as an artist and the things that make you you. I don't know. Those are the two things I think about a lot.
Yeah.
The thing you said about putting the brakes on really resonated with me. And there was, speaking of other things that Maestra has offered over the years, they did something, it was like about a little over a year ago, maybe, an imposter syndrome, like 3-episode panel. So the first 2 panels, one, if you're invited to come, if you're an experienced Maestra, and then the second was like more for like early career, but you could go to either one. It wasn't like a big deal. And these consultants whose names escape me at the moment, they're not on the top of my head anymore. But there are these consultants who work on imposter syndrome in different organizations and different communities. And they listened to get more detailed information, and they asked some guiding questions, and like gathering data from the Maestra community about what gives us imposter syndrome. And then they sort of like collated the data and shared it in the 3rd episode of that workshop. But one of the questions was I don't remember how it was phrased exactly, but it was basically like, what do you give yourself permission to do? What kind of work do you give yourself permission to accept? So that's like, do you give yourself permission to orchestrate a Broadway show? Or do you only give yourself permission to like do little unpaid workshops? So there's a lot of sort of like and I don't think I'd ever thought about my own career in that way, of like what I give myself permission, what I believe I'm qualified for, or what I give myself permission to learn on the job. And so that was a really interesting conversation that was had during that time.
Yeah. It's so interesting you mentioned imposter syndrome, because I've interviewed a couple of people in my time of doing this podcast, and a lot of performers have mentioned the imposter syndrome before. So I'm sure that resonates all throughout the industry of like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, I mean, I get it too, interviewing people. Like, here I am interviewing like Tony winner Beth Level, and it's like, how did that happen? And I have to act totally like, oh, this is normal. Like, I'm fine with that, all these things. So I mentioned earlier that Maestra will be doing a concert coming up. Do you guys want to talk a little bit more about Amplify?
Amplify. March. Amplify is always the final Monday in March. So Women's History Month, and it's always the last Monday of March. So this year, what is that, the 25th?
Yes,
Yes.
it's on Monday.
And
I'll repeat where it is. It's at Sony Hall in New York. They also have virtual tickets, only because Kathleen said she would be joining virtually. That's how I know. At Sony Hall, Monday, March 25th at 8 p.m. Doors open at 7:30. Okay. Just wanted
I
to
will say, I have I believe this to be true, a clarification. Maestra is not live streaming Amplify this year.
Oh, this year.
Oh,
Okay.
I lied.
Yeah, this year. I think what they have decided to focus on the in-person aspect of it, and then they're going to be representing some of the communities around the world with video montage of greetings, so that where else Maestras are doing things in the world. But you can, if you want to support Maestra, or wish you could be at concert, you can purchase a ticket for a member of the Maestra community. So that's on the ticket page, which I'm sure will be linked somewhere. Yeah, so that they've live streamed it a couple of times, but I think a little cost benefit analysis is just not happening this year. But it's going to be an amazing concert if you are in New York. And there will be ways to see. I'm sure there'll be like clips of it or something like that you can check out after the fact.
Well, now that we got the ticketing taken care of, let's talk about the concert.
Yeah, it features, I mean, just to say more generally what it is, but it features often like maestras from all over the world, and features work written by maestras and played by maestras and the band. I mean, it's just such an enormous celebration. I mean, it's concert, it's entertainment, and it's the major fundraising event for Maestra every year. And it's just, I don't know, it's been every year that it's occurred, it's just such a thrilling representation of the amount of creativity and talent, and just like the breadth of that in this community. So it's really a singular event.
Yeah, it's really cool to see just like all of the different styles of music that come out, and just like a pet peeve I have is when people assume that women only play certain instruments or certain styles, and this is kind of an antiquated peeve, but it still comes up every now and again. It's just like,
Kat,
whoa,
you
a
can
woman
rap
trombone
to
player?
the piano.
I
Like,
rap and play the piano at the
you
same
rap and play
time.
the piano. There was
I
somebody on The Voice yesterday who
Yeah.
was rapping and singing, and it was a female. We can do
Yeah,
anything.
we can do anything. I make electronic music. There are trombone players who are women and non-binary people. Like, we can make loud noises
Hmm.
or we can make quiet noises. We do the full dynamic range of music. So I think that's one of the great things, like, that's come through. I've gotten to watch it on the live stream a couple times. And I'm really excited to be there in person this time. But just like that, the diversity of voices within our community, and then again with the see it to be it, just seeing like the band and the music director, the orchestrations, like everything is done by maestras. So again, with the assumptions of, like antiquated assumptions of like women can't do such and such, or such and such, that's just math, science,
Hmm.
playing a brass instrument, playing percussion, orchestrating, whatever may be assumed about us. And I think that's part of the reason that often we don't like to admit we don't know something, because the assumption is already that we don't know something sometimes. So just having a whole concert that's like, actually, we do all of these things and we do them really well. And once a year, we're going to blast that out into the world very loudly. Amplify, nice name.
I I just did a quick count, Kat, when you said that people think that women can only play certain instruments. I think that there's 62 instruments available to choose from on the Maestra directory when you fill out your. So yeah,
To
definitely.
include the hurdy-gurdy.
Yeah, we got the hurdy-gurdy is about to get added. So there's a
What is
lot.
a hurdy-gurdy?
It's a sort of, I'm gonna butcher this, and I apologize to Olivia Hamilton, who is the maestro who requested the hurdy-gurdy, because she plays it. It's like a small organ-like keyboard instrument.
Yeah, it's like a hand crank organ. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, now that we're coming towards the end of the podcast, like I mentioned, I always ask certain questions. So, one of them is, do you have any dream roles or projects that you want to work on? I mean, I don't know if you guys want to like act or sing or something, but are there any dream projects that you want to work on, whether it be like some sort of revival, new work, something you're working on, what have you?
I think something down the line for me, because I've been doing uh, workshops and readings of new works, developing them here at Syracuse, both in a directorial role and in a dramaturgical role. And I'm really interested in directing a world premiere production of a new musical. That's something that is going to be on my horizon, hopefully at Syracuse within the next year or so, and then potentially beyond that too. But I think thinking back on something I was saying earlier about giving somebody their first shot, I'm really interested in helping a writing team to get to see the first production of a work that they've written with our resources at Syracuse. I think that I realized it took me like a year or two after being at this job to realize that I suddenly had access to resources that I could help to share with others, like to bring them into Syracuse and say like, oh my gosh, yeah, come on, we have like these wildly talented students, we have these facilities, we have all of the sound equipment, we have musicians, we have all sorts of stuff. You can come and you can see your work come to life here, which is just such a gift for a writer, for a composer, for a creator, and we have student designers, so it's really remarkable, and I'm that's a big mission for me personally and something I want to do.
That is awesome. I'd say for me, as I think some of it is like I'm sort of living some of it already. Like, I had a dream for a really long time to like save up some money and take a gap year to sort of renegotiate my relationship with the industry, because I'm from such a small place, and then New York City, I love New York, and then just figuring out the reality of living in a like human body and not being able to be two places at once, at least in the flesh. So certainly, like building a program where maestros can connect with each other wherever they are, or whatever community they're, trying to find, and improving that structure, creating more of it. That's a dream, number one. And then as far like, I'm also a composer and lyricist, so I do have a project that I dream of getting produced, and that is, it's working title. It's a song cycle called Mine, and it's basically about, you know, a mining community and just like songs about mining and being in a mining community and interfacing between rural and urban, which is something I think about a lot. So that's a dream of my own, like, personal creative work. But I loved how much Kathleen talked about like just building structures for other creative work to like hang on. I'm just like picturing like ivy growing on these beautiful structures that Kathleen is building. Um, so I think both of those things are kind of a dream of like being able to do some of my own creative work that represents something that's really personal to me, that I feel is specific to my lived experience. And then also like being really aware of how important infrastructure is, and being part of creating that for other people in Maestra.
Well, not to like be that person, but Kathleen does new works in Syracuse and you are working on something. So just, you know,
Talk to me, Kat.
that Maestra
Don't think I didn't
community.
write Syracuse down on a little post-it here on my desk.
Good, good. I'm also my other plug to hopefully spread far and wide, but I'm another project that I'm working on is I'm co-authoring a book right now that's about new work development in academia. So how to get more new musicals done in these sectors too. So, but yeah, I think that I love you know, just hearing Kat, you talk about your own personal projects and also like that balance between, you know, we want to get our own work done, but we're also, as we find ourselves in these different positions, we're realizing that like we can be part of creating kind of the systems that can lift other people up who come after us too. And I think like sitting at the intersection of that is a really exciting time, and to be doing that with this organization.
Yeah.
So I usually end the podcast asking why theater is important to each guest, if I remember to ask it, but I kind of want to add to that. Why do you think theater is important, and what role do you think Maestra plays in that, and why you think it's important that they do?
Like
I know
dead
I came
silence
with a
while we
big
like
gun
digest the
question.
question. I've honestly been wrestling with that idea. Like, this is like sitting here in a gap year with a lot of unstructured time on my hands and trying to fit more projects than actually fit into a year into that unstructured time, and like what's important to me. So I'm like actually sort of sitting with that question in life. So you'd think I'd have an answer by now, and I don't.
You know what? It's
I
okay if you don't.
I think that I'm kind of a science nerd too, like not good at science, but I like science, like as a civilian. I like the idea of science. And so like I go to this like sort of zoom out place of like, we're a narrative making species. Like we're a species with imagination. Like that's part of being human. I think that theater is important because it's what makes us human, is telling stories and making sense of our existence through language and through symbols. And I think that it's part of what makes us who we are. So that's as far as I've gotten.
Yeah, I mean, I just to build on that, but yeah, I think it cultivates imagination, it cultivates connection, it cultivates empathy. I mean, it cultivates so many things that I think are at times in short supply these days. I think it's kind of the salve for a lot of what ails us in our society today. I mean, the empathy ingredient, I see that with my students. I think honestly is probably the most important thing that I teach on a daily basis, is how to imagine what someone else's experience might feel like, how it might affect them, what their priorities and their dreams might be. Like, to be able to get outside of yourself and into someone else, I just think it is what makes us human. It's also what makes us our best selves. And I think that is at the heart of everything that we do with storytelling and with theater.
Yeah. And how do you think Maestra's involvement also can help with why theater as a whole is important?
I'm going to amend my answer to the last question before we address Maestra. I also see, I think working on Hamilton, I see, and I just thinking back to before Hamilton existed, for example, it does change how we show up in the world. So what we all agree on as stories, and even if we don't agree on what the story means, and even if we don't agree on what stories we like, the stories that are out there and the stories that are popular, and then the touchstones we have to, like, you know, if you make a reference to some famous TV show or Hamilton or, famous whatever, like that's a way of connecting in the world, but it also impacts how we see people, and how, like my parents listened to a rap musical because I was working on it. Like they would never have listened to rap 20 years ago, or they, what they think about rap and hip hop and the people associated, what people look like who are associated with rap and hip hop. I think it has maybe not consciously, but subconsciously shifted their ideas about that. And like how they show up in the world may have changed because of that or other shows they've seen. So I think it's important because of how the empathy piece of it and putting ourselves in other people's shoes for 2 or 3 hours at a time makes a difference in how we then show up in the other 160, however many hours of our week.
Yeah.
Maestra, Kathleen, I'm going to hand it over to you for a
Sure.
second.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what I would say is very simply like the stories that get told are in large part determined by the voices that are involved in doing the telling, right? And so I think whether it is the people who are writing the stories, the people who are directing, music directing, acting in the stories, and so if we want to be able to tell stories that are more representative of the world in which we live, and to have that empathy stretch even farther and have that education go even deeper of different experiences other than our own, we have to get more voices in the room. And I think that is absolutely central to the mission of Maestra, of lifting up women and non-binary voices throughout the music side of the musical theater industry.
Cool. Kat, do you have anything? You're like, that's great.
I think she said it so well. And I think, again, it's both like creating, I think there's both an internal and an external like community aspect to Maestra. So like internally giving us support of each other and of things that we share, experiences that we may stumble upon in the industry that are similar, and just to have someone to share them with and get advice about or whatever, laugh about them, cry about them, whatever. And then there's the external of like, hey, we're here and we have perspectives that might differ. We have varying perspectives that might differ from each other as well as those out there. And we have something of value to add to the larger thing. So I think it's both of those things.
I love how you put that, just say that, Kat, the internal and external. That's like the perfect way of saying what I was trying to say
And
earlier.
there's like
about,
not even a membrane between them.
Yeah,
it's
there's
like,
not. No, it's permeable. Yeah,
here.
it all flows, but it's interesting to think about Maestra being created maybe in the beginning for more the external purposes, like see us, we're here, but then that internal community that came from that is like it just corresponds with it and helps to fuel it too.
Well, with that being said, for those who are interested to see Amplify, once again, it is performing on Monday, the March 25th at 8 p.m. at Sony Hall. You can get your tickets at maestramusic.org/amplify. Ladies, thank you so much for coming on. Before we end, is there any like questions, problems, concerns, life advice, anything you want to add before we end?
Go sign up for the Maestra newsletter. Go to maestramusic.org.
Go check out the directory.
Check out the directory.
Follow all the links. Go down a Maestra rabbit
links.
hole. There's so much cool stuff going on.
Go to the jobs board.
Vimeo channel.
There's a Vimeo channel. There's a lot of things. So go down the Maestra rabbit hole. Enjoy.
Well, thank you guys. You can stay on once we're done recording. I just find it funny when I end my thing, I always look at my microphone like I'm talking to a person. So if you see me off to the side, it's me looking at my mic. So thank you for those who listened. Again, please check out maestramusic.org/amplify for tickets for the Amplify concert. Also, if you just want to check out what's going on with Maestra Music, just maestramusic.org. Become a member. Kathleen will see your stuff and she'll let you know if
Yes,
you're joining. And then maybe in late November, you can have Kat as a mentor. You don't know until you join.
Or I might recruit you. I might recruit you as a local moderator or a regional moderator, and you can get Maestras together.
Yeah, because again, Maestra is not just New York. It's going to be a global takeover for women and non-binary people who work within the musical theater industry.
And we're doing a big overhaul to the region area of the directory to make it even more specific and more searchable. So now's a good time to come on in.
And we're also adding an instrument, the hoobaluba. I probably
adding the hoobaluba, the hurdy-gurdy and its sister instrument.
I'm going to need to go out this afternoon and buy a hoobaluba.
Yeah. What's a hoobaluba? I don't know. What's a hoobaluba with you?
I don't know, but I need one now. Turns out we had a lot to add.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all so much for listening. And that's it.
Thank you.
Ooh.